September 9th, 1944. Royal Army Ordnance Corps Maintenance Depot, Brussels, Belgium. Staff Sergeant Arthur Pemberton of the British 8th Armoured Brigade placed his torch on the workbench and stared at the identification plate riveted to the dashboard of the GMC CCKW truck before him. Production number 342,617. His hands, still grease-stained from inspecting the gearbox, trembled slightly as he wrote in his maintenance log. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. We rejected these 4 years ago, called them underpowered rubbish, unsuitable for modern warfare. Now I understand our mistake. It wasn't the design that was inadequate. It was our understanding of what wins wars. Through the open doors of the depot, Pemberton could see what British military analysts had privately termed the American deluge. Endless columns of identical GMC trucks stretched from the captured port facilities through the city centre toward the forward supply dumps, their engines producing a continuous mechanical symphony that never paused, never faltered, never stopped. Each truck bore fresh mud from French roads and carried precisely 2.5 tons of ammunition, fuel, rations, or replacement parts toward units advancing on the German frontier. What Pemberton and his fellow British mechanics were witnessing that September morning represented something beyond simple military logistics. They were observing the physical manifestation of a fundamental truth that would reshape modern warfare. That industrial capacity properly organized could achieve what tactical brilliance alone never could. That standardization, mass production, and relentless availability mattered more than engineering perfection or individual vehicle superiority. That democracy, when fully mobilized, possessed advantages authoritarian systems could never match. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. The mathematics were stark and undeniable. More than 560,000 GMC CCKW trucks had been manufactured between 1941 and 1945. Production peaked at 1,800 units per day across 2 General Motors facilities in Pontiac, Michigan, and St. Louis, Missouri. By comparison, the entire German military logistics system operated approximately 100,000 trucks of all types combined, built by dozens of different manufacturers using incompatible parts and requiring specialized maintenance procedures. British military doctrine, refined through centuries of imperial warfare, had emphasized quality over quantity, craftsmanship over mass production, versatility over standardization. The British Army's vehicle fleet in 1944 included trucks from Austin, Bedford, Morris, Fordson, and Canadian military pattern manufacturers, each with unique specifications, different maintenance requirements, and limited parts interchangeability. This approach made sense in peacetime or limited colonial conflicts, where skilled mechanics could maintain diverse fleets and replacement vehicles could be manufactured gradually. American industrial philosophy operated from different principles entirely. Standardization enabled interchangeability. Interchangeability enabled mass production. Mass production enabled overwhelming numerical superiority. Numerical superiority, sustained over time, enabled victory regardless of individual equipment, superiority, or tactical brilliance. The GMC CCKW embodied this philosophy in every component, every design decision, every manufacturing process. The crisis that forced British recognition of American logistical superiority had begun weeks earlier, with Operation Cobra on July 25, 1944. General Omar Bradley's First Army breached German defensive lines in Normandy after nearly 2 months of grinding attrition warfare in the Norman hedgerows. The breakthrough unleashed Lieutenant General George Patton's Third Army, operational from August 1st, which erupted across French countryside at speeds unprecedented in military history. Patton's armoured divisions sometimes covered 75 miles in a single day. German 7th Army collapsed. By mid-August, Allied forces had encircled and destroyed German units at the Falaise Pocket, eliminating approximately 50,000 enemy soldiers and leaving another 10,000 dead. The road to Paris lay open, the road to Germany beckoned, but victory created its own desperate crisis. The Allied advance had outrun every logistical projection, every supply plan, every transportation capability. Each American division in combat operations consumed approximately 750 tons of supplies daily, everything from ammunition and fuel to rations and medical supplies, cigarettes and replacement boots, radio batteries and spare tank tracks. With 28 divisions pushing eastward simultaneously, daily requirements approached 21,000 tons. The mathematics were brutal and unforgiving. Pre-invasion bombing campaigns that crippled German reinforcement capabilities had also devastated French infrastructure. Allied bombers had methodically destroyed every major rail line in northern France to prevent German counterattacks. The strategy succeeded militarily, but created a logistical nightmare. Traditional supply methods could not function. Major French ports remained in German hands. Cherbourg had been captured, but German demolitions rendered it nearly useless until late September. The port of Antwerp, captured on September 4th, would not be cleared of mines and opened for shipping until November 28th. Every ton of supplies still came, across Normandy beaches through makeshift Mulberry harbours, artificial ports towed from England and assembled in the English Channel. By late June, these innovative structures had unloaded 170,000 vehicles, 7.5 million gallons of fuel, and 510,000 tons of supplies. The system worked, but it could not keep pace with Patton's advance. The solution emerged from a 36-hour brainstorming session in late August, involving Colonel Laurent Albert Ayers, known to his men as Little Patton, and Major Gordon Graul. These Transportation Corps officers faced an unprecedented challenge. They needed to move massive tonnages over distances that exceeded anything American logistics had previously attempted, using roads not designed for heavy military traffic through a country still partially occupied by German forces. The solution borrowed a term from American railroad practice. Since the 1890s, Santa Fe Railroad had marked priority express shipments with red balls painted on freight car sides. Around 1892, the railroad began using this designation for perishable goods and priority freight requiring immediate transport. By the 1920s, red ball designation indicated the fastest, highest priority cargo throughout American railroads. Trains carrying red ball freight received absolute priority. All traffic cleared for their passage. In Normandy, this concept would be applied to trucks. Colonel Ayers and Major Graul designed a one-way loop system. 2 parallel routes would connect Normandy supply dumps to forward logistics bases near Chartres, approximately 125 miles inland. The northern route would carry loaded trucks eastward. The southern route would carry empty trucks back to the coast. Both routes would be closed to all civilian traffic and would have absolute priority over all other military movements. Military police would control every intersection. No convoy would stop for anything except mechanical failure or enemy action. The Red Ball Express, as this operation came to be known, began operations on August 25, 1944, with 67 truck companies comprising 3,358 vehicles, mostly GMC CCKWs, carrying 4,482 tons of supplies on the inaugural run. Just 4 days later, the operation had expanded to 132 truck companies and 5,958 vehicles. On August 29th, the system reached its peak single-day performance, transporting 12,342 tons of supplies to forward positions. This represented more tonnage moved in one day by road transport than the entire German Wehrmacht had ever achieved in any single day of operations during the entire war. The implications were staggering. British observers, initially skeptical of American logistical capabilities, began filing reports that mixed professional admiration with barely concealed astonishment. A British liaison officer attached to Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force wrote in his daily intelligence summary for September 2nd, "The American transportation effort exceeds anything in our experience. The scale of operations, the standardization of equipment, and the organizational efficiency represent capabilities we had not fully appreciated. Staff Sergeant Pemberton, examining his 47th GMC truck that week in Brussels, understood exactly what that British officer meant. The ACKWX trucks Britain had rejected in 1940 as inadequate had been the predecessor model to the CCKW. British military evaluators in summer 1940, testing those earlier trucks, had deemed them unsuitable for modern warfare. Their reports, preserved in military archives, were damning. The wheelbase was too long for European roads and trails. The trucks were difficult to maneuver in tight spaces. The 77 horsepower engine was underpowered for the vehicle's weight, especially when fully loaded. Acceleration was poor. Hill climbing ability was marginal. The trucks struggled in mud and soft terrain despite their six-wheel drive. British Army officials concluded the ACKWX was fundamentally flawed. Rather than commit these trucks to combat use where British lives might depend on them, the War Office diverted approximately 1,000 units to the Soviet Union under Lend-Lease agreements in 1941. The British rejection appeared to validate concerns that American truck manufacturers, accustomed to wide highways and gentle terrain, could not produce vehicles suitable for European warfare. General Motors engineers, stung by this assessment, returned to their drawing boards. The lessons from the ACKWX experience were clear. More power was needed. The chassis required refinement. The wheelbase needed options for different missions. But the fundamental concept, a 6x6 medium tactical truck built from commercial components for rapid mass production, remained sound. In 1941, General Motors introduced the redesigned version designated CCKW. The nomenclature came from GMC's internal coding system, C for designed in 1941, second C for conventional cab design, K for all-wheel drive, W for dual tandem rear axles. The improvements over the ACKWX were substantial, but not revolutionary. The new GMC 270 cubic inch inline six-cylinder engine replaced the 248, producing 104 horsepower at 2,750 revolutions per minute. A 27 horsepower increase might not sound dramatic, but it transformed the truck's performance. The engine delivered 216 foot-pounds of torque at 1,400 revolutions per minute, providing the low-end power needed for heavy loads and steep grades. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Engineers designed two wheelbase options. The CCKW 352 with 145-inch wheelbase served as a short wheelbase variant for artillery prime mover duties. The CCKW 353 with 164-inch wheelbase became the standard cargo configuration. This flexibility allowed the same basic truck to fill multiple roles across different combat units. The frame was a conventional ladder design with riveted crossmembers, simple to manufacture and repair. 3 beam axles, all driven, provided the 6x6 capability. The front axle mounted on leaf springs. The rear tandem used leaf springs with locating arms to control axle movement. Brakes were hydraulic with vacuum assist, a significant improvement over older mechanical systems. Tires were 750-20, providing reasonable ground clearance and load capacity. Initial production models retained the closed metal cab from the ACKWX design, but as war production accelerated and steel became a rationed strategic material, GMC engineers made a critical decision. Beginning in July 1943, new CCKW trucks received open cabs with canvas tops and removable doors. This change saved approximately 150 pounds of steel per vehicle. Multiply that by hundreds of thousands of trucks, and the steel savings became enough to build dozens of destroyers or hundreds of tanks. The cargo bed went through evolution, driven by material constraints. Early trucks had all-steel beds, which proved heavy. Wooden beds replaced them but warped and cracked under military loads. A composite design with steel framing and wooden floor slats still proved inadequate. The final design returned to simplified all-steel construction that reduced material waste while maintaining durability. Staff Sergeant Pemberton's examination of the CCKW before him in Brussels revealed why these trucks succeeded where their predecessors failed. The engine, though producing only 104 horsepower, was designed for sustained operation under load. The overhead valve configuration improved fuel efficiency and reduced maintenance intervals. The inline six-cylinder design minimized vibration and provided smooth power delivery crucial for loaded operation on poor roads. The 5-speed Warner T93 transmission represented elegant simplicity. Fourth gear was direct drive, fifth was overdrive, allowing the truck to maintain highway speeds while conserving fuel. The transfer case included high and low range and engaged the front axle for off-road capability. Originally using Timken split-type axles, later production shifted to GM banjo-type axles. Both designs proved robust under punishing demands of military service. What impressed Pemberton most, examining his 20th GMC truck that morning, was the standardization. Every component was identical to every other truck. Every bolt matched standard sizes. Every gasket used common patterns. Every electrical connection followed the same layout. Any mechanic trained on one Jimmy could repair any Jimmy anywhere. Spare parts were completely interchangeable between vehicles regardless of when or where they were built. This mundane reality, boring to discuss but critical in practice, proved decisive in sustained operations. German trucks were excellent vehicles individually, representing high-quality engineering and craftsmanship, but they came in dozens of incompatible types, requiring different parts, different maintenance procedures, and different training for operators and mechanics. A German mechanic might be expert on Opel Blitz trucks, but helpless when confronted with a Mercedes-Benz L3000 requiring different tools, different parts, different procedures. American trucks were ruthlessly standardized. The strategic implications were profound. A replacement transmission could be installed in any CCKW in the European theatre using standard tools and procedures. Spark plugs, fuel pumps, brake shoes, leaf springs, drive shafts, differentials, all interchanged completely. When a truck broke down, another truck carried the replacement part. When that truck broke down, parts from it repaired others. The system was self-sustaining in ways German logistics could never match. Pemberton straightened from the engine compartment and looked again at the endless column of GMC trucks moving through Brussels toward the German frontier. The American deluge, British intelligence called it, an apt description. These trucks represented something beyond mere transportation. They represented industrial philosophy, organizational capacity, and strategic thinking that Britain, despite its engineering excellence and military tradition, had failed to fully embrace. The British rejection of American truck design in 1940 had been based on legitimate technical observations. The ACKWX trucks were underpowered compared to British specifications. They did have longer wheelbases that made manoeuvring difficult on narrow European roads designed for horse-drawn traffic. They were heavier than comparable British vehicles. These criticisms were factually accurate. What British evaluators failed to grasp was that these characteristics mattered far less than they believed. In total war between industrial powers, adequate equipment produced in overwhelming numbers defeats superior equipment produced in limited quantities. Trucks that mechanics can repair with basic tools outperform trucks that need specialized equipment and factory support. Simplicity is its own form of sophistication. The scale of American production revealed this truth with mathematical precision. Between February 1941, when serious CCKW production began, and August 1945, when production ended, General Motors manufactured approximately 528,000 CCKW trucks across all variants, not including the amphibious DUKW derivative. This represented more trucks than the entire German military vehicle fleet of all types combined at the peak of Wehrmacht strength. Production statistics told the story. GMC's Yellow Coach and Truck Division facility in Pontiac, Michigan and Chevrolet's Street, Louis plant together produced an average of 1,400 CCKW trucks daily during peak production in 1943 and 1944. At this rate, American factories built more trucks every 5 days than Britain had rejected and sent to the Soviet Union in 1941. Every week, American production added the equivalent of a new mechanized division's worth of transportation capacity to Allied logistics. The strategic mathematics were devastating to German hopes. Each GMC truck could carry 2.5 tons of cargo. 528,000 trucks represented a theoretical capacity of 1,320,000 tons of supplies in constant motion. In practice, accounting for maintenance, loading time, transit, and return trips, the actual capacity was lower, but still staggering. The Red Ball Express alone, using fewer than 6,000 trucks, moved 412,000 tons of supplies in 83 days of operation. Staff Sergeant Pemberton finished his inspection of the GMC truck and signed the maintenance release form. The truck was operationally sound. Minor oil leak from the transfer case seal, easily repaired. Brake adjustment needed on the right rear axle, 15 minutes work. Spark plugs showed normal wear, replacement recommended in 200 operating hours. Nothing that would prevent the truck from continuing its mission. As Pemberton watched the truck rejoin the convoy heading east, he reflected on what British military analysts were privately acknowledging in classified reports circulated through Royal Army Ordnance Corps headquarters. American logistics had achieved what German blitzkrieg could not: sustained advance over hundreds of miles without pause, without culmination, without operational exhaustion. The German blitzkrieg concept, developed in the 1930s and perfected in campaigns against Poland and France, depended on rapid armoured thrusts supported by tactical air power. It was brilliant when it worked. German panzer divisions conquered Poland in 5 weeks, France in 6 weeks, and drove deep into the Soviet Union in 1941. But blitzkrieg had a fundamental weakness. It was a sprint, not a marathon. German logistics could not sustain the pace that German tactics achieved. After initial breakthroughs, German advances inevitably stalled as supply lines stretched, fuel ran short, ammunition depleted, and mechanical breakdowns accumulated faster than field repairs could address them. The Wehrmacht never solved this problem. German advances always culminated. German offensives always exhausted themselves. American logistics represented the opposite philosophy. It was designed from the beginning for sustained operations over continental distances. The Red Ball Express maintained average daily deliveries of over 5,000 tons for 83 consecutive days. No German logistics operation ever sustained comparable tonnage over comparable distance for comparable duration. British military observers documented this reality in operational reports that circulated through Allied headquarters in autumn 1944. A Royal Engineers liaison officer attached to American 1st Army Logistics Command wrote on September 17th, "The American capacity for sustained supply operations exceeds our previous estimates by considerable margin. Their standardization of equipment enables maintenance and repair at scale we cannot match with our diverse vehicle fleet. The implications for future military operations deserve careful study." The implications were indeed profound. Modern warfare, as conducted by industrial powers, was ultimately decided not by tactical brilliance or individual soldier courage or weapons technology superiority, but by logistics capacity. The side that could sustain its forces in combat longer, supply them more reliably, replace losses more quickly, and maintain operational tempo more consistently would prevail regardless of tactical setbacks or strategic complications. Germany possessed superior tactics, superior operational art, superior individual weapons in many categories, and soldiers as brave and capable as any in history. Germany lost because it could not sustain operations against enemies whose industrial capacity and logistical systems overwhelmed German advantages in other areas. The GMC CCKW, dismissed by British evaluators in 1940 as inadequate, became the physical embodiment of why Germany lost. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. The transformation in British military thinking about American logistics capabilities did not occur suddenly or completely. Institutional resistance to acknowledging that American approaches might be superior to British methods remained strong in some quarters. But field-level recognition came quickly as British units increasingly operated alongside American forces and observed the scale of American supply operations. British units in Europe received thousands of GMC trucks through Lend-Lease allocations, beginning in 1942. Initial skepticism among British drivers and mechanics gradually transformed into appreciation as the trucks proved their worth under combat conditions. The long wheelbase that seemed awkward on narrow European roads provided excellent stability for heavy loads. The engine that seemed underpowered proved adequately strong and remarkably reliable. The simple design meant British mechanics trained on complex vehicles requiring precision. Maintenance could keep CCKWs running with whatever tools and parts were available. A British transport officer wrote in his after-action report from the Normandy campaign, "The American lorries, initially dismissed as crude, proved superior in sustained operations to British vehicles that required more sophisticated maintenance. The GMC truck's ability to continue functioning despite neglect and abuse made it ideal for the chaos of combat logistics. British units learned to prefer these trucks over our own for long hauls under difficult conditions." This represented a significant shift in military thinking. For centuries, British military doctrine had emphasized quality, craftsmanship, and technical sophistication. British weapons were engineered to high standards. British equipment was built to last. British vehicles incorporated advanced features that demonstrated engineering excellence. These approaches made sense in peacetime or limited conflicts, where quality could compensate for quantity. Total war between industrial powers operated under different rules. When enemies possessed comparable technical capability, industrial capacity, and logistics sustainability determined outcomes. The side that fielded adequate equipment in overwhelming numbers defeated the side that fielded excellent equipment in limited numbers. American military philosophy embraced this reality from the beginning. British military thinking began adapting to it only after observing American logistics operations in France. The numbers told the story with clarity that admitted no argument. The Red Ball Express, operating from August 25 through November 16, 1944, transported 412,193 tons of supplies to advancing American armies. This represented more tonnage than the entire German logistics system moved to support Operation Barbarossa, the largest military operation in history, involving over 3 million men advancing across a 2,000-mile front. The entire German military logistics system during Operation Barbarossa consumed more resources to advance 600 miles than the Red Ball Express required to sustain advances of 400 miles while supporting multiple army groups simultaneously. The Red Ball operated on a fraction of the frontage with fewer troops, but ton-mile for ton-mile, accounting for distance and tonnage moved, it was exponentially more efficient than anything the Wehrmacht accomplished. This efficiency resulted directly from American industrial design philosophy. Standardization enabled interchangeability of parts. Mass production reduced costs and increased availability. Organizational flexibility allowed rapid adaptation to changing circumstances. German trucks were excellent vehicles individually, but they came in dozens of incompatible types. American trucks were ruthlessly standardized, and this mundane characteristic proved decisive. Staff Sergeant Pemberton, completing his maintenance shift in Brussels, had examined 73 GMC trucks that week. Every one used identical components. Every one followed the same maintenance procedures. Every one could be repaired using the same tools and parts. This consistency enabled the British depot to maintain hundreds of American trucks with a fraction of the personnel and facilities required to maintain the same number of British vehicles from different manufacturers. The organizational implications extended beyond immediate wartime logistics. British military planners, observing American operations in Europe, began reassessing fundamental assumptions about equipment, procurement, and logistics doctrine. The realization was uncomfortable but unavoidable. British emphasis on quality and diversity had created logistics vulnerabilities that American emphasis on standardization and quantity had avoided. A classified British War Office study completed in December 1944 examined comparative logistics efficiency between British and American forces in the European theatre. The study's conclusions, though diplomatically worded, acknowledged American superiority in logistics organization, equipment standardization, and supply sustainability. The report recommended that post-war British military procurement adopt American-style standardization to improve logistics efficiency and reduce maintenance burden. This represented a fundamental shift in British military thinking that would influence procurement decisions for decades. The lesson was clear and supported by overwhelming evidence. In modern warfare between industrial powers, logistics determines what is possible on battlefields. Industrial capacity matters more than tactical brilliance when conflicts extend beyond initial encounters. Democratic organization can surpass authoritarian systems when properly structured and led. The GMC CCKW proved all these principles through sustained operations under the most demanding circumstances imaginable. From Normandy beaches to the German frontier, through rain and mud and winter cold, these trucks maintained Allied armies in continuous combat operations for months without pause. No comparable logistics achievement existed in military history prior to 1944. The human cost of this achievement deserves recognition. Approximately 75% of Red Ball Express drivers were African American soldiers serving in a segregated military that denied them full equality. These men drove through exhaustion, through fear, through discrimination, because the mission mattered more than personal comfort or recognition. They operated in shifts that often exceeded 24 hours. They navigated damaged roads under blackout conditions. They faced occasional German air attacks and artillery fire. Private Emmanuel Green of the 3214th Quartermaster Service Company wrote in his diary on August 29th, "We drove until we could barely stay awake. We did it because we knew our brothers at the front needed us. We did it because we wanted to prove what Black Americans could accomplish. We did it because it needed doing." These soldiers returned home to an America still deeply segregated. Men who had risked their lives supplying the fight against fascism faced discrimination in housing, employment, and civil rights. Some used GI Bill benefits to obtain education and home loans, though even these benefits were often harder to access for African Americans. Banks refused loans, universities imposed quotas, employers passed over qualified black veterans for white applicants. But the story endured. The Red Ball Express became one more chapter in the long struggle of African Americans proving their worth to a skeptical nation. The technical and organizational achievements validated American industrial philosophy. The human achievement advanced the broader cause of civil rights by demonstrating that African American soldiers could handle complex critical missions under the most demanding conditions. The GMC CCKW continued serving in American military logistics for years after World War II ended. The truck saw extensive service in the Korean War from 1950 to 1953. Some remained in National Guard service into the Vietnam War era. The basic design influenced post-war military truck development globally. The 6x6 configuration became standard for military medium tactical trucks worldwide. The concept of using mass-produced, easily maintained vehicles rather than specialized military designs became accepted practice. Countries around the world copied or adapted CCKW features in their own military truck programs. Soviet designers who received thousands of CCKWs through Lend-Lease studied the trucks carefully. Post-war Soviet military trucks, including the ZIL series, showed clear CCKW influence in layout and capability. The Soviets understood that the CCKW's greatest feature was not any single technical specification, but the entire package of adequate performance, simple maintenance, and massive availability. Staff Sergeant Pemberton, finishing his tour of duty in Belgium in December 1944, wrote in his final report to Royal Army Ordnance Corps headquarters, "The American trucks we rejected in 1940 proved more valuable than we understood, not because the design was superior in technical specifications, but because the Americans grasped what we missed. They understood that winning wars requires adequate equipment in overwhelming numbers, operated by determined people who understand their mission matters. The Germans had better tactics. The Americans had better logistics. Logistics won. This assessment captured the essential truth that British military observers learned watching American supply operations in France. The GMC CCKW was not the best truck of World War II by conventional technical measures. German trucks had better individual specifications in many categories. British trucks had features that demonstrated more sophisticated engineering, but the CCKW was adequate, and adequate trucks by the hundreds of thousands, driven by drivers willing to work until they collapsed, supplied the most successful military campaign in history. The humble 2.5-ton truck, dismissed by British experts in 1940 as unsuitable for modern warfare, became the lifeline that sustained Allied armies from Normandy to the Elbe River. The drivers, 75% of them African-American soldiers fighting for a country that still denied them basic civil rights, proved that excellence knows no racial boundary. The story of British mechanics examining GMC trucks and understanding how American logistics operated at unprecedented scale is ultimately a story about what wins wars. Not the most advanced technology, not the most impressive specifications, not the vehicles that look best in promotional, photographs, or official demonstrations. What wins wars is reliable equipment produced in quantities that overwhelm the enemy, operated by determined people who understand their mission matters. September 9, 1944, had begun with Staff Sergeant Pemberton doubting the adequacy of American equipment. It ended with his understanding transformed by evidence that could not be denied. The endless columns of identical trucks moving through Brussels toward Germany represented something profound. They represented the triumph of industrial capacity over tactical brilliance, of sustainability over initial advantages, of democratic organizational power over authoritarian military force. The GMC CCKW would continue serving, continue moving supplies, continue enabling Allied victory, but its greatest contribution was already complete. It had demonstrated conclusively that in total war between industrial powers, logistics determines outcomes. The side that can sustain operations longer, supply forces more reliably, replace losses more quickly, and maintain tempo more consistently, will prevail. The British had learned this lesson watching American trucks roll past by the thousands. The Germans would learn it watching their armies collapse as ammunition ran out, fuel dried up, and replacement equipment never arrived. The Japanese would learn it watching their soldiers starve on Pacific islands, while American forces remained supplied and supported. The mathematics were clear, undeniable, and decisive. American trucks driven by American soldiers, supplied by American factories running on American fuel, proved more effective strategically than German tactics, German engineering, and German military tradition combined. The most mechanized military in history was not the Wehrmacht, despite propaganda suggesting otherwise. It was the United States Army, and the Red Ball Express was its beating heart, pumping supplies forward with regularity and reliability that made victory inevitable once the system was established. British mechanics understood this, watching the American deluge flow past their depot day after day, week after week, month after month. They understood that they had rejected in 1940 what proved decisive in 1944. They understood that American industrial philosophy, which seemed crude and unsophisticated compared to British engineering tradition, had grasped fundamental truths about modern warfare that British military thinking had missed. More than 200,000 GMC trucks moved entire armies across Europe because they were adequate, not because they were excellent. Because they were standardized, not because they were diverse. Because they were available in overwhelming numbers, not because they represented technical superiority. This was the lesson British mechanics learned examining American trucks in Brussels in September 1944. It was a lesson that would reshape military logistics doctrine for generations, a lesson that would influence equipment procurement decisions worldwide, a lesson that demonstrated conclusively that in modern warfare, sustainability matters more than sophistication, quantity matters more than quality, and logistics determines what tactics can accomplish. The GMC CCKW proved all these principles through sustained performance under conditions that destroyed lesser equipment. The truck, dismissed as inadequate, became the vehicle that won the war. The drivers considered inferior because of their race proved themselves under circumstances that broke lesser men. The logistics system considered crude outperformed systems considered superior. History records definitively which approach proved correct when tested against comparable opponents over sustained periods. The British learned watching American trucks roll past by the thousands. The world learned watching Allied armies advance continuously while German forces collapsed from lack of supplies. The lesson was clear, undeniable, and supported by evidence that admitted no counter-argument. Logistics wins wars. Industrial capacity determines outcomes. Sustainability defeats sophistication. These truths, proven by the GMC CCKW and the men who drove them across France in 1944, remain relevant today. They remind us that excellence in warfare is not always about having the best equipment, but about having adequate equipment in overwhelming quantities, operated by people determined to accomplish their mission regardless of obstacles. Staff Sergeant Pemberton understood this, completing his shift in Brussels that September evening. The American deluge would continue flowing eastward toward Germany. The trucks would keep rolling, the supplies would keep moving, the Allied armies would keep advancing, and the lesson would remain clear for anyone willing to see it. Sometimes the most valuable things are the simplest ones, operated by people determined to get the job done no matter what challenges they face. The GMC CCKW proved this truth beyond argument. The Red Ball Express demonstrated it beyond question. The victory it enabled validated it beyond doubt. The winter of 1944 brought new challenges that would test American logistics philosophy under the harshest conditions yet encountered. As Allied armies pushed toward the German frontier, the Wehrmacht launched its final desperate gamble in the Ardennes forest on December 16th. The Battle of the Bulge, as it came to be known, created a logistics crisis that made the summer supply challenges seem manageable by comparison. German forces drove a salient 60 miles deep into American lines, encircling the 101st Airborne Division at Bastogne and threatening to split Allied armies in half. The weather turned brutally cold. Snow blanketed the Ardennes. Roads became sheets of ice. Visibility dropped to near zero. These were precisely the conditions under which sophisticated equipment failed and simple, reliable machinery proved its worth. The GMC CCKW trucks that British mechanics had examined in Brussels 3 months earlier now faced their ultimate test. Operating in sub-zero temperatures, on icy mountain roads, under constant threat of German ambush, American supply convoys maintained the flow of ammunition, fuel, and winter equipment to units fighting for survival. The trucks that British evaluators had once deemed inadequate for European conditions now demonstrated why American design philosophy emphasized reliability over sophistication. Captain James Morrison of the British 21st Army Group Liaison Section filed a report on December 28 that captured the transformation in British military assessment of American logistics. His words, typed on a portable typewriter in a frozen headquarters building near Liège, Belgium, acknowledged what months of observation had proven beyond dispute. The American supply system has maintained operations under conditions that would have paralyzed traditional logistics. Their trucks continue functioning in weather that has immobilized much of our own transport. The difference lies not in technical superiority of individual vehicles, but in the systematic approach to maintenance, the standardization that enables field repair with available parts, and the organizational discipline that keeps supply flowing despite all obstacles. We must acknowledge that American methods, which seemed crude when compared to our engineering traditions, have proven more effective under sustained operational stress. Morrison's report circulated through British Army headquarters and eventually reached the War Office in London. It joined a growing body of evidence forcing British military planners to reconsider fundamental assumptions about equipment procurement, logistics organization, and industrial mobilization. The lessons from observing American operations in Europe would influence British military doctrine for decades. The statistics from the Battle of the Bulge told the story with brutal clarity. Between December 16, 1944 and January 25, 1945, American supply units delivered more than 250,000 tons of ammunition, fuel, rations, and winter equipment to units fighting in the Ardennes. This tonnage moved primarily by truck, over icy roads, through blizzard conditions, under constant threat of enemy action. German logistics, by comparison, collapsed within days of the offensive's launch as fuel shortages immobilized tanks and ammunition shortages silenced artillery. The Luftwaffe mounted its largest air operation since 1940 on January 1, 1945, destroying or damaging more than 400 Allied aircraft on the ground. Yet this tactical success had no strategic impact on Allied logistics. American factories produced replacement aircraft faster than combat could destroy them. American supply trucks continued delivering fuel and ammunition despite air attacks. American maintenance units kept trucks operational despite winter conditions. The contrast with German capabilities could not have been starker. Germany's most powerful offensive effort since 1941, launched with surprise and initial success, collapsed within weeks because logistics could not sustain the advance. American defensive operations, initially thrown into chaos by the surprise attack, stabilized and counterattacked successfully because logistics maintained supply flow despite all disruptions. Staff Sergeant Pemberton, now assigned to a forward maintenance depot near Bastogne, witnessed this contrast firsthand in early January 1945. German vehicles captured during the American counteroffensive arrived at his depot for technical evaluation. These vehicles represented some of the best German engineering could produce. Many were nearly new, manufactured in late 1944, with the latest improvements German designers had developed. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.